Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is back answering more questions from senators. Several topics of conversation have come up, including search and seizures, critical race theory, teachings, gender identities, Supreme Court shadow docket rulings, and much, much more, as you can imagine. Senator Ted Cruz has taken issue with past statements and rulings Jackson has made and continued to question her on transgender and child sex abuse issues. Here's a moment from earlier today when Senator Cruz addressed the sentencing of one of Judge Jackson's cases. Take a listen.
You said in this instance, with Mr. Chazen, you said among the defendants nationwide who received a below-guideline sentence on the basis of a downward variance as opposed to a departure, the average sentences ranged from 84 to 92 months. So that's what you lay out as the average. Our Democratic colleagues say, well, other federal judges sentence below the guidelines. That is true. A number of federal judges do. Our Democratic colleagues have not pointed to a single federal judge in the country who 100% of the time sentences child porn defendants to markedly below what the prosecution has recommended, unless you have a mandatory minimum and no ability to do so. In this case, you say comparable defendants are sentenced to 84 to 92 months. Sentencing guidelines by statute require you to have similarly situated defendants sentenced to similar sentences, but you don't sentence Chazen to 84 to 92 months. You sentenced him to 28 months. Why?
Senator, I've said what I'm going to say about these cases. No one case can stand in for a judge's entire record.
Okay, but I'm discussing every one of your cases. So if you're not going to explain it...
Senator, would you please let her respond?
No, not if she's not going to answer my question.
Well, if you're just going to give a speech, then you shouldn't engage in questioning.
You are not taking my time. If you want to filibuster, you're welcome to do so, but do it on your own time.
I would at least give you an opportunity to speak, and you should give her an opportunity to respond.
If she wants to answer the question, I asked her why
Please allow her to answer the question.
I asked her why she sentenced Chazen to 28 months when comparable defendants, in her own words, were sentenced to substantially higher, and she said she's not going to answer. Did you? I would welcome your answer, please.
Senator, I didn't say I'm not going to answer.
Okay, well,
I
then
said
please
my
tell us
answer.
In this case, Chazen, why did you sentence him to just 28 months?
Senator, you're looking at the record. I don't have the record here. What I will say is that in every case, I looked at the recommendations of not only the government, but also the probation office, the defendant, the record, the evidence. I took into account the seriousness of the offense. And
by the way, you know, one of the striking things in Chazen, the prosecutor comes in front of you and says, this is the prosecutor's argument at this point, and the prosecutor says, I understand from my experience before Your Honor, Your Honor's objection, policy objections, to the 2G2.2 sentencing guidelines. And he goes on to say, however, in this case in particular, the 4-point specific offense characteristic is justified because it contains sadomasochistic images of infants and toddlers. I'm trying to understand how you see someone that possesses images of infants and toddlers being sexually violated, and you sentence them to 64% below what the prosecutor's asking for. You don't provide a justification other than a generic concern that the guidelines are too high. You don't provide a justification as required by statute. So I'm asking you to take the opportunity to explain to this committee and the American people why in 100% of the cases you have people with vile crimes, and you have language saying they're vile crimes. But then you sentence them to very, very low sentences. And why do you consistently 100% of the time choose to do that?
Senator, no one case can stand in for a judge's entire sentencing record. I've sentenced more than 100 people. You have 8 or 9 cases in that chart.
Okay, Judge, you said that before. These are the 8 or 9 child porn cases. I will say, to correct the record,
I just say to the judge, there's no point in responding. He's going to interrupt you.
Thank you.
Look, I appreciate the chairman trying to filibuster, and if you don't like your witness's answers, you're welcome to provide your own. She is declining to answer the question, and Chairman Durbin, if you want to join her on the bench, you can. But Chairman Durbin,
my job is to make
Chairman Durbin, I'm not interrupting your questioning.
I'm asking you to give her a chance to answer.
But
You
she's
refuse to do
consistently
it.
said she's not going to answer. I want to clarify for the record, by the way, the case I was discussing was Cooper and not Chazen.
All right, I want to welcome a special guest joining us now, former federal prosecutor Katie Cherkasky. Katie, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I want to begin by checking in with you. You're an interested and educated observer of these proceedings. We saw some contention there. It was expected. We knew this was coming. But can you characterize for us, in your estimation, these proceedings so far and how they've been going along?
Well, I think they've been going pretty much as expected. You know, after the Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett hearings, there was a lot of concern about the decorum and the collegiality of the exchanges. So I think for the first couple of days, it was pretty much sticking to Judge Jackson's record and her philosophy, or trying to get some answers to that. So it hasn't gone, in my opinion, too personal. But of course, this exchange with Senator Cruz got very contentious based on the lack of answers that he felt he was receiving there. So I think that there's a stark contrast in how we're seeing the media treating these hearings versus the prior two Trump nominees. But aside from that, there has been obviously some contention about Judge Jackson's actual record and history on the bench.
All right, so how is she holding up so far? How would you rate her performance so far in front of the committee?
I don't think that there's anything that's going to change her chances of getting confirmed to the Supreme Court. Obviously, I think, as we all know by now, if she gets every Democratic vote, then she will in fact be confirmed. There was a question about whether she could potentially even get some Republican votes. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I don't think there's a huge question about her confirmation in terms of the attacks and the idea that her record suggests that she is soft on crime or somehow very far left. I think that that was pretty obvious. She's filling Justice Breyer's seat. She is expected to be ideologically very similar to that. I don't think that that's particularly surprising, and I don't think any of her answers have yielded anything that people didn't expect. The one thing I will say in terms of what I'm a little surprised by is she has an opportunity to offer a lot more explanation in my mind about some of these topics, but perhaps she doesn't feel that's necessary, or is playing it a little bit safer in terms of just kind of keeping it very tight in her answers and not getting into these debates that you could easily get sucked into, as you can see.
You know what's interesting? She has characterized herself as not an activist judge. She said that she will respect precedent. That's sort of the direction she comes from. What can we expect from her on the bench? Again, given the fact that she might have a minimal effect on the numbers in terms of the breakdown with liberal justices and the conservative justices and voting on various cases, but just the introduction of another woman, and a black woman at that, certainly has to have some effect on this court.
Sure, I think it absolutely will. And obviously, like you mentioned, it's not going to change the makeup of the court. There's still a conservative majority. So she will be, in many cases, I assume, writing dissents, which can be very impactful on the court and can even persuade the other members of the court in some direction that perhaps they were not going to go. But I think just as a matter of symbolism, at the very least, it's very important to see that she's bringing this diversity to the court, even though practically speaking, at least for the time being, there won't be any sort of shifts in probably the outcomes of many cases along partisan lines. But ultimately, I mean, she's very young. She's theoretically going to be on the court for quite some time. So her influence will, in fact, grow over time.
All right, let me bring back in trial attorney Dina Sayegh-Dole into the conversation. Dina, I'd love to get your take on what we've seen so far in these confirmation hearings, how it's all going for the prospective new or prospective nominee.
I thought she did a really great job handling a lot of questions that really didn't have anything to do with her as a justice. You know, Senator Cruz also brought in books about critical race theory and things like, and she did a really good job of, you know, just saying that this is not about what I'm doing as a judge. So I agree with your guest that a lot of what's happening isn't going to change the outcome of it, but this is her introduction to the public. I think the takeaway is that she does seem to be handling herself well. Certain people will, I think she came across impartial as well. Whether or not that convinces people that maybe we're predisposed against her, that we'll see. But it's really important for the reputation of the court for her to have come across as well as we did, because we really need the country to trust the opinions that come out of the court as being unbiased.
Katie, do you see any special challenges? The fact that she is a black woman, the first black woman on the Supreme Court, are there any special challenges that she may face in that position?
Well, I think in terms of her position on the court, no. Getting through these hearings, obviously, it's very uncomfortable to be faced with these questions, some of which won't directly even come up. But there's going to be criticism, of course, and there's going to be scrutiny of somebody that is coming from a different background in terms of exactly what they are going to do. Because it's one thing to answer questions about your judicial philosophy in a confirmation hearing, but that doesn't commit you in the future to vote one way or the other on particular cases. So I think obviously with any new justice, we're going to watch very closely in terms of where they actually end up in their rulings.
All right, well, Katie Chakowski, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Truly appreciate it. Dina Sayeghdal, you're going to be standing by as we continue with our coverage of the confirmation hearings. And we're going to take a look at a moment that happened yesterday where Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson, was asked about transgender athletes competing in sports. And we asked you in our Daily Talkback segment whether you thought transgender athletes should be able to compete in the sport of their gender that they identify with. We'll have your answers right after the break. Keep it right here on Court TV.
Download Earnin.
Just last week, an entire generation of young girls watched as our taxpayer-funded institutions permitted a biological man to compete and beat a biological woman in the NCAA swimming championships. What message do you think this sends to girls who aspire to compete and win in sports at the highest levels?
Senator, I'm not sure what message that sends. If you're asking me about the legal issues related to it, those are topics that are being hotly discussed, as you say, and could come to the court.